Hello friends, we are here in Mark chapter 14. So this is a big chapter, there's a lot of sections here. And so there's 11 of them in total. And so I'll go through them one by one and I'll highlight the things that I think are most interesting. So the first is there was a plot to kill Jesus. You know, they were sitting around, they were trying to figure out, how do we kill this guy? You know, he's taken away from our power. He's undermining our authority, and we want rid of him. And it's interesting is that at this time, the next section, the anointing at Bethany. Now, they were sitting at the house of a guy that I think Jesus had healed. You know, it said that he was a leper, Simon the leper, and I have to believe that he wasn't still a leper. I know that Jesus probably would have healed him at this time. But it says this woman comes in with the alabaster jar full of pure nard. It says that, I mean, it doesn't say it here, but we know that it would have been worth about the average person's yearly wage. So let's say it's about $60,000. And she just breaks it and she puts it over Jesus' head. I have to assume that, you know, there's a part of this book that has a lot to do with spiritual sight. You know, being able to see things that God has just revealed to you. You know, that spiritual sight is really interesting to me. I've been thinking a lot about it lately. Just that there's this way to just know something and to have so much trust in it that you could spend $60,000 on some oil just to anoint his head. You know, just so that you know he's about to be killed, and she knows it, and she knows that he's God, and she knows it so clearly, and she has so much faith that she just anoints him with this. It's so fascinating to me, and that's why, you know, it says, you know, anywhere that they tell about him, they'll tell about what she did. And I also think that this is what caused Judas to betray. I don't know, but it must have been the last straw, because right after this, you know, the next section, it says Judas betrays Jesus. And we know from the book of John that he's the one that spoke up and said, how, you know, why would you let this happen? We could have given this money to the poor. And he's like, no, this was a wonderful thing that she did. So you have the spiritual sight of this person, Mary. We know also from the book of John that it's Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. And then you have Judas, who does not have any spiritual sight, who's been with him for years, and he just doesn't see it. He just doesn't see that he is God. He sees this waste of money. He's thinking, this can't be the guy. You know, he's being wasteful. And so he goes off and he betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So the next section is called the Passover with the disciples. So Passover comes, and God kind of orchestrates this thing, you know, where they find this guy with the jar and they brings him up to this room and nobody's seen him before. You know, it must have been God just revealed it to these different people that, you know, prepared this room for them. And so Passover was kind of like what we would, you know, kind of like celebrating our Thanksgiving. You know, it's something that you have a big meal together. It's always a big group of people, but it's to celebrate when God passed over the, you know, it was the last plague in the 10 plagues that happened back in the book of Exodus. And so that, you know, they killed the angel of death killed the oldest son, but it passed over every house that had blood on the sides of the doors and on the top. And so, interesting, it was the blood of a lamb, you know, that's clearly a picture of Jesus to come. And so here on the same day, they're having this night. So clearly on the same day, they're having this celebration, and this is the same night that Jesus is taken, and that within the day he's going to be killed. And so he the next section here is he makes the Lord's Supper. Now the Lord's Supper is basically an alteration on the Passover Seder. During the Passover, they would have different elements. I say elements, but it was just different bits of food, and they all had different significance. And so he grabs the unleavened bread, and he says, "This is my body broken for you." And then he grabs one of the cups, the cups of wine, and he says, "This is my blood that was shed for you." Now this is significant. When he says, "This is my blood," he's doing what he has been doing for many chapters here, and he's foretelling his death. And that's significant. He knew it was going to happen, and he willfully went into it. But he's saying, this is my blood. And essentially he's saying, by my death is how you're going to live. Because of my death that's going to happen, in the next 24 hours, you guys should live. But it's not just the death that he's highlighting here. He also highlights his body, symbolizing his life. So he's saying, remember my teachings, remember the example that I've given you. So he says, my body was given to you so that you may know how to live, and my blood was given for you, symbolizing his death, so that you can have eternal life through the sacrifice that I'm about to make. So that's what Jesus is doing here. I'd love to talk more about this, but that's what he's doing. He used the elements of the Passover that already had significance, and he's giving it he's fulfilling its true significance from before, but he's also giving it new significance for the future. So the next section is Jesus foretells that Peter would deny him, and he says, I would never deny you. Even if everybody else does, I will not. And he says, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. The next section is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. So this garden still exists today, the Garden of Gethsemane. It's a real garden that grows olive trees, and these olive trees live for thousands of years. So it's possible that if you Google Garden of Gethsemane and you see these trees, it's possible that those are the same trees that were there when Jesus was there. And so he's praying in the garden, and we know that he was in so much anguish that drops of blood were coming down his face. And he kept on telling his disciples, stay awake. Now it's interesting to me that the previous chapter I named it Stay Awake because he told this parable where he was saying, if God tells you to stand guard, you should stay awake. And I don't know if I'm connecting dots that aren't meant to be connected here, but I feel like Jesus was trying to tell us something, like we need to stand guard, and it's difficult. It's like falling asleep. And so we need to stay connected to God. We need to know what's happening, because later on Jesus is going to be betrayed, and they're going to be running after him, and they're not going to have any trouble staying awake then. Peter lasts the rest of the night because he's watching Jesus, but we need to be vigilant today for what's going to happen in the future. We need to keep the faith. So So Jesus is betrayed. They come in and Judas kisses him, which is the sign, and they take him away. And the next section here is a young man flees. And this is kind of funny. We don't know exactly who this is, but we know that this is the only book that has this story. So there's a good chance that the person here that's fleeing is John Mark, the person who wrote the book. But he doesn't mention him by name, and I guess I probably wouldn't either. It just said there was this young man who was wearing, a cloth, and they wanted to grab everyone, and they grabbed his cloth, and he just, they took his cloth away, and he ran away naked. And the next section is Jesus before the council. The interesting part about this to me is that everybody kept on testifying against him, but they couldn't get their stories straight. Nobody had anything really to nail against him, because even the things that they were getting right, they were mixing up their stories. And finally, they just asked Jesus, like, are you the Son of God? And he's like, yeah. I have to believe in that moment they were probably like, look, we really need to get this guy. Somebody's got to say something. And then they're like, look, are you the Son of God? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, well, we don't really need anything else. You've made this crazy claim and it can't be true. So we're going to crucify you for it. And then after that comes the denial of Jesus by Peter. And what a bitter moment this must have been. This gospel is from the perspective mostly of Peter. And it must really tear him up. And it's funny because I feel like if this were me, I don't know it would tear me up so much. And I think that's probably wrong, but I think that in our culture, we don't have this honor-shame sense that they had back then, of denying. We don't have honor like they had back then. And I kind of wish we did in some ways. To deny Jesus was wrong. And I kind of feel like, well, Jesus would forgive me, I'm trying not to be killed, but we should know that we should not deny Jesus. Not to other people, not in our own hearts. We need to accept Jesus. We need to be proud of it. We need to go around and tell other people about him. So that is Mark chapter 14. All right, have a great day. Bye.